How good was Arvydas Sabonis actually? Man, algoritmas išmetė šitą video, bet sudomino.
Domantas Sabonis is a three-time NBA All-Star, and yet he still hasn't reached the heights of his father. Standing at 7'3" with massive hands, Arvydas Sabonis was bigger than Shaq, yet he could run the floor like a gazelle. And unlike Shaq, Sabonis was a good shooter. In fact, he was more accurate from the three-point line than...
Aš nesu krepšinio žiūrovas, aš nesu fanas, aš nenusimanau krepšinį nieko realiai. Aš Sabonį prisimenu. Aš prisimenu, jį kaip žaidėją ir kaip legendą, kaip ten visi kartodavo, netgi kai Kretoje, atrodo, buvau senai su draugė ir mes nuvarėm ten net už Kretos į kažkokį ten random salelę, žinai, ir ten random kavinukai ir padavėjas ten užkalbino kažką ir dėl Sabonis. Tai Sabonis, legenda visiškai buvo. Ką aš prisimenu, jis ten tipo gerai darė, tai ten mesdavo į tą savo kablį, tipo į krepšinį, daugiau nieko nežinau apie jį.
Than some of the best shooters of his era. But these aren't even his best attributes. Despite a polished post game and feathery touch, his greatest skill by far was passing. All the one-touch assists, behind the back and through the legs passing wizardry that makes Jokic dominant today, Arvydas was routinely doing 30 years ago. When he came to the NBA at the age of 31, the Portland doctors claimed that he had the ankles of a 70-year-old. And that he could get a handicapped parking space based on his x-rays alone. But even with a torn Achilles, bad knees, and an arthritic foot, Sabonis dominated. And if he had come to America sooner, he could have easily been the greatest center in the NBA. However, to understand what makes his career so remarkable, and one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, we need to go back to where it all started. Arvydas was born in 1964 in Kaunas, Lithuania, a country where basketball is a religion. So Sabonis was dribbling a basketball as soon as he could walk. By the age of 13, young Arvydas joined the Žalgiris team, and he immediately started dominating against much older opponents, after which he quickly joined the USSR junior national team. But he didn't stay there for long. In 1981, after he obliterated the competition and won gold at the Under-18 European Championship, a Hall of Fame coach, Alexander Kumelski, immediately pulled Sabonis to join the senior USSR team. The bond between the Russian coach and the Lithuanian center became bonus to join the senior USSR team. The bond between the
Jesus Christ.
Russian coach and the Lithuanian center became like a father-son relationship, and Kumelski became a great mentor to the young Sabonis. But while this limitless trust that Sabonis had in his mentor would propel his career to the highest highs, it would also ultimately destroy him. As an 18-year-old kid, Arvydas made his World Cup debut in Colombia in 1982, where the USSR won the gold medal against the USA team led by Doc Rivers. At the time, the Cold War was at its peak, but the USSR basketball team often went on sports and peace tours in America, where they played against the best NCAA teams. That same year, after the World Cup, Sabonis played on American soil for the first time. When he squared up against Ralph Sampson, the future first overall pick of the 1983 draft, Arvydas scored 21 points with 14 rebounds. After the Soviets beat Bobby Knight's Indiana Hoosiers, the legendary coach said, "Sabonis may be the best non-American player I've ever seen," but Sabonis was only warming up. When he returned home, Sabonis kept improving to the point where he became unstoppable. See, from 1936 until 1984, CSKA Moscow won every Soviet basketball championship. That's almost 50 titles in a row. And then came Sabonis, spoiling the dominance of Russia's richest team, leading Žalgiris to 3 straight championships. In 1985, the USSR walked over the competition en route to the European Championship. And in the stands watching the finals was the future NBA Hall of Famer Bill Walton. He probably had a quadruple-double in the first half. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. My jaw dropped. Arvydas could do anything. He had the skills of Larry Bird and Pete Maravich. He had the athleticism of Kareem and could shoot the three-pointer. He can pass, run, and dribble, and his blocks are pure art. We should have kidnapped him from the floor and taken him to America. Sabonis' great play prompted the Atlanta Hawks to select him with the 77th pick in the 1985 draft, but Sabonis could not come to Atlanta because of political reasons. At that time, the Soviet Union blocked any contact with the West, and it was unthinkable for someone to leave the USSR and move there. These rules apply to everyone, including top athletes. However, not only did Sabonis not come to the Hawks in 1985, he had no idea that he was even drafted. He found out about it only a year later when he was selected by the Portland Trail Blazers in 1986. After Portland drafted me, somebody told me that I had been drafted before. I didn't know that. You know, back then in the Soviet Union, we didn't get a lot of information. Without knowing anything
Bet mes laisvi taigi buvom, taigi geriau buvo, laisvi buvom. Lol, ble.
about it, Sabonis thus became a key figure in a rule change in the NBA. Because after the Hawks failed to draft the Lithuanian, Atlanta was furious and forced the league to introduce a rule that the club that drafted the player could claim him indefinitely. Come 1989, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain began to crack, and Mikhail Gorbachev started the relative democratization of the Soviet Union. And it was a big deal for athletes who could finally go abroad. The first big name in Soviet basketball to go to America was Sabonis' compatriot, who joined the Golden State Warriors in the summer of 1989. In that first wave, Vlade Divac, Los Angeles Lakers, Alexander Volkov, Atlanta, and Drazen Petrovic, Portland, also came as European pioneers. However, Sabonis didn't join them, and the biggest reason for that was his mentor, Alexander Gumelsky. Sabonis was incredibly devoted to his coach, who advised him to stay in Europe so that he could dominate back home. But that devotion would nearly end Arvydis' career. During the preparations for the 1986 World Cup in Madrid, Sabas suffered his first serious ankle injury. Despite the pain, Arvydis wanted to play to keep Gumelsky happy. And not only did Sabonis play, but he was a key figure in the
O nežinau, ar jis paskui buvo apie tai šnekėjęs, kaip jam paskui gyvenime, nes dabar jau daug vyresnis, nežinau. Play. $60 jam jo. Kaip jam, nu, pavyzdžiui, senatvėj koja? Ar jis pastoviam ten skausme ir turi vaistus gerti? Nes aš nežinau, čia tokia, tipo, nu, sanarių, kaip čia ankle traumos visokios, jos tik, nu, niekur nedingsta, aš kaip žinau, ten, nu, paskui su metais vis blogin ir blogin, nu, tie skausmai, jis yra kur interviu ar kokiam kalbėjęs, kaip su tuo?
Craziest turnaround in the history of European basketball when the Soviets made up a 9-point deficit in the semifinals against Yugoslavia with just over 40 left in the game. In the final, Arvydis played a great game against David Robinson, but none of the Soviet guards could catch up with speedy Kenny Smith, who won the game for the United States. A few months later, insufficiently recovered from his ankle injury, he hyperextended his Achilles tendon. Sabonis could barely walk, but he didn't know how to say no to Gumelsky, so he played in the final of the domestic championship against CSKA. Zalgiris celebrated against their biggest enemy, and Sabonis played great, but the consequences remained. Then, 2 months later, during the preparations for the 1987 European Championships in Athens, Sabonis led the Soviets to a silver medal, but then it happened. His Achilles popped, and he couldn't walk anymore. He missed the entire first half of the next season, but the worst part is that this was only the beginning of his injury troubles.
Jesus.
While rushing to answer the phones, Sabonis fell down the stairs, and his newly healed Achilles tendon ruptured again. Under normal circumstances, he would have been absent from the court for months, but at that time, in the Soviet Union, that was out of the question. Although he announced that he would not perform at the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, Gumelsky again forced his pupil to show up. Their initial agreement was for Sabas to go to Seoul and be a spectator, but when the tournament started, it didn't take long for Gumelsky to push Sabonis into the starting five. And miraculously, it paid off. Sabonis and the Soviets defeated the USA in the semis and Yugoslavia in the finals. Arvydis dominated with 20 points and 15 rebounds in a 76-63 victory to celebrate an Olympic gold medal. For the entire 1989 season, Sabonis played on a bad Achilles. But even on one leg, he led the Soviets to another medal, this time a bronze at the European Championships. And then, when his fellow Europeans finally joined the NBA, Arvydis stayed back home because of Gumelsky. Sabas was desperately wanted by the Portland Trail Blazers, who even hired Valdis Adamkus, the future president of Lithuania, to act as a mediator and persuade Sabonis to sign the contract with Portland. But while Adamkus was waiting to board his flight to Kaunas, he heard the news that Sabonis had already signed for the Spanish team Valladolid. Without Sabonis, the Blazers made the NBA Finals in 1990 and 92, but they couldn't get over the hump. If Sabonis had arrived in Portland in 1989, I'm sure we would have won several championships, and the history of the NBA would have been totally different. Clyde
Ne, aš tokio pačio ūgio kaip Sabonis. 2,85 m. Blet, nieks nėra tokio ūgio. Kokio jis ūgio? Ne, aš... Jis absurdiškai 2,21. Holy fucking shit. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Arvydas finally got the opportunity he had dreamed of to compete with the Lithuanian national team at the 1992 Olympic Games in Barcelona. Lithuania had a
Nes pusę metro aukštesnis už mane, pala, už mane kiek čia būtų? 1,84 aš. Tai 40. Kiam centimetrų aš teisingai suskaičiau? Nu, beveik. Jesus, jo. Jesus Christ.
had a fantastic generation. But the Russians collected all the money on their way out, and the Lithuanians didn't have enough funds to send their team to the Olympics. So the entire trip to Barcelona came into question. And then one of the craziest stories in the history of basketball happened. Sarunas Marciulionis was playing in Golden State at the time, and mutual friends introduced him to Jerry Garcia and the rest of the Grateful Dead after a concert. And it turned out that Garcia was a big basketball fan, because when he heard about Lithuania's problems, he proposed a solution. Lithuania's players had to wear psychedelic t-shirts with the band's logo, and in return, they received the money needed for preparations and a trip to the Olympics. Sabonis and Lithuania played great, but in the semifinals, the dream team was simply too strong for everybody. Lithuania lost to the US, but they managed to defeat Russia in a bronze medal game with a monster 27-16 from Sabonis. Arvydas was the third best scorer at the Olympics with 24 points, and the leading rebounder with 13 boards. He was extremely happy after the bronze medal win and got so drunk that he didn't even appear at the medal ceremony. The medal in Seoul was gold, but this bronze is our soul, he said when he sobered up. After this, Sabonis kept winning medals with the national team, grabbing a silver medal at the 1995 Eurobasket and another bronze at the 96 Olympics. At the club level, Sabonis once again nearly ended up in Portland, but they were too hesitant when he became a free agent in 1992. And then Real Madrid, the richest club in Europe, swooped in with a $1.5 million contract, which was more than Portland was willing to offer. As Sabonis liked it in Spain, he decided to sign a contract for 3 years. Although his health and mobility were severely impaired by then, Arvydo showed that he had no competition in Europe. With Real, he won the EuroLeague title in 1995 and was voted as the MVP of the Final Four. In his 6 seasons in Spain, he averaged 21 points, 12
čia šitas kadras realiai kaip tas...
MVP of the Final Four. In his 6
Kaip šito, blet... Jordano? Jo, kaip Jordano tas vos tas išsižergęs logotipas, tas ore tik čia. Pala, kaip jis atrodo? Tas... Jo, nu beveik jo. Grynas. Okay.
6 seasons in Spain, he averaged 21 points, 12 rebounds, and nearly 3 blocks per game. With 15, he averaged 21 points, 12 rebounds, and nearly 3 blocks per game, with 55% shooting and 39% from 3. And while this doesn't sound like much by NBA standards, bear in mind that the teams rarely averaged more than 70 points in 40 minutes of game time in Europe. During the 1995 season, the Blazers management made one final attempt to lure their prized draft pick to finally come overseas. But knowing his injury history, the Blazers wanted to make sure that Sabonis was physically able to withstand the rigors of the NBA. And when the results of his physical came back, they shocked everybody. Arvydas should get a handicapped parking spot based on his x-rays. Blazers doctor Robert Cook half-jokingly concluded. However, despite everything, the Blazers believed Sabonis could still help them. And finally, 10 years after he was initially drafted, Sabonis came to the NBA for the 95-96 NBA season, signing a 3-year deal for $8 million. At 31 years old, he was the oldest NBA rookie ever at the time. But we really doubt that anyone made the 7'3" Sabonis buy donuts for the team. And despite not being able to run like he used to, and playing with constant pain, Arvydas was still doing what he did best. When he arrived in Portland, it took a while for his teammates to get used to the fact that such a big man could have such a great basketball IQ. I would pass the ball to the high post and start to move through the paint, and the ball would hit me in the head. I said, where does this giant get such an overview of the game? Said his teammate Rod Strickland, until he realized...
Tai, blet, kai tokio ūgio yra, nu, tai visą mapą mato iš aukštai, nu.
Where does this giant get such an overview of the game? Said his teammate Rod Strickland, until he realized that he must always keep a close eye on what Sabonis does when he has the ball. In his rookie season, Sabonis mainly came off the bench, averaging 14 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists in just 24 minutes of playing time, shooting 55% from the field and 38% from 3. In the playoffs, he was even better.
Jis į kažį mesdavo tiesiog žemyn. Oi, blečia bairis.
Averaging 23 and 10 with 55% shooting from three. He finished second in voting for the Sixth Man of the Year award. With Sabonis and the team, Portland made the playoffs in all 7 seasons of his NBA career, but the closest they came to a title was in 2000. That season, the Blazers were a fantastic team, with a combination of proven vets like Scottie Pippen, Detlef Schrempf, Sabonis, and Steve Smith, alongside talented young players in Jermaine O'Neal, Damon Stoudemire, Bonzi Wells, and All-Star Rasheed Wallace. The Blazers defeated the Timberwolves and the Jazz to reach the Western Finals against the mighty Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. After 6 games, the series was tied, and in Game 7, Portland had a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter and already had 1 foot in the finals. Shaq, who won the MVP that year, could bully every other center in the league, but against Sabonis, who was bigger than him, his numbers dropped. However, in the fourth quarter of Game 7, the Blazers missed 13 shots in a row, and the Lakers made an improbable comeback, highlighted by the most memorable play of Kobe and Shaq's career in LA. After this loss, Portland collapsed, fully embracing the nickname Jailblazers. And in the next few seasons, there were constant problems with the team. And in one instance, Sabonis nearly killed Rasheed Wallace.
Shaq hits him, Sabonis flops, hits one of our teammates in the mouth, chips a 2. Dude is going off, and Sabonis looks at me just like this. I will kill him.
In 2002, Sabonis retired, but then made a comeback in 2003, playing 14 minutes per game before finally retiring from the NBA. However, Sabonis still wasn't completely done with basketball, deciding to join his hometown Žalgiris for one last season. And he went down in style. At the age of 40, Sabonis led Žalgiris to the top 16 of the EuroLeague and was elected MVP of the EuroLeague regular season, leading the league in blocks and rebounds.
Wow.
All players who played with or against him had nothing but praise for the Lithuanian giant.
Arvydo was Dirk Nowitzki.
Tipo, ten kokiam, žinai, League of Legends, ten žmogus žaidžia savo piką, kažkur savo regione, žinai, pasiekia tą regioną ir tada, pavyzdžiui, Ameriką išvaro retirint. Čia pusiau džiaukas, bet, taip ir varydavo, žmonės varo retirint, ten algos geros, skilas šūdnas, nesvarbu, išvaro tenais pochui, tipo, užsidirbti tiesiog ant galo karjeros jau. Jeigu nori kažką pasiekti, arba Koreja, arba Europą pusiau bent jau kažkiek, tipo, bet jo, ir tada jau viskas karjera kaip ir baigės. Jeigu tada grįžta, tada arba streameriais tampa, arba ten žaidžia for fun lygose, tipo, done, tipo, viskas. Čia Sabonio karjera, tai atrodo, traumas, jau visiškai done turėtų būti, bet ne, aš važiuoju tada po 10 metų, jau atrodo po pyko vos ne į Ameriką. Ten, žinai, jau viskas atrodo done, viskas, jau actually done, viskas. Grįžta į Europą, dar, davai, pažaisk dar Žalgirį vieną sezoną, tipo, ir nežinau, gal ten ir nebuvo jau pats pykas, bet vis tiek performini dar nėra, kad washed up jau, žinai, čia karjera belenkokia.
Only 7'4", okay? He shot threes, passed the ball like Larry or Magic.
It was unbelievable because he was a big guy who can move, who can shoot, who can pass.
His younger days, like Sabonis was probably the most dominant big man to play the game. Because he put it on the floor, not no crossover shit or nothing like that. He could shoot the 3. Sabonis probably the best big man passer that I've played with.
Sabonis was a hybrid between Shaq and Jokic. And if he came to the NBA in the mid-'80s, before all his foot injuries and with all the athleticism and shooting prowess, maybe we could have had pace and space positionless basketball 30 years ago. Thank you for watching Nonstop. And for more...
Okay, cool. Labai geras, man patiko.
Koks vakaras ilgas, kaip širdim man kelia. Nuskink man jazminę.